All right, we are here in the PHLY studios after the Eagles' selection of Alabama's Jihaad Campbell at 31 after setting a fifth-round pick to move up one spot. And we are with Zach Berman, who just spoke to Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni. And my number one question for you, Zach, is Jihaad Campbell a linebacker or an edge?
So I think so. He's a football player. That's like the obvious answer. But I think he's going to lean more toward edge rusher. Howie Roseman would not put him in the box. Howie Roseman would not put him in the box of off-ball linebacker. Howie Roseman emphasized multiple times the pass rush ability, the ability to affect the quarterback. That's what jumped out to them here. Howie Roseman mentioned how he was recruited as a pass rusher, as a defensive end. Howie Roseman mentioned that he even gave the comparison to Penn State linebackers who played off the ball in college and then moved to the outside in the NFL. And he would not. I asked Howie specifically when he gets to, because they kept talking about versatility. When he gets to the Eagles, is he going to be with Jeremiah Washburn, the defensive end, the outside linebackers coach, or Bobby King, the inside linebackers coach? He wouldn't give an answer to that. But listen to this nugget. Jihaad Campbell, his one conversation with the Eagles was with Washburn, who coaches the edge rushers.
Interesting. What do you make of that, Fran?
I mean, it certainly seems like they're viewing him as an outside linebacker at that point. Because so basically, if he only met with Jeremiah Washburn, then that means that it was an informal interview at the combine. So you have the formal interviews where you bring the player in, he meets with the whole staff,
right,
for 15 minutes. But the informals, that's more of a one-on-one type of environment. That might be with a position coach or an area scout. So the fact that he met with Jeremiah Washburn, my guess is it wasn't a situation of, like Bobby King is taken up. My guess is they purposely wanted Washburn to meet with Jihaad Campbell.
Zach, very funny that they're at 31 are throwing a Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter comparison on the guy already. Way to soft sell the expectations. But Howie Roseman did say this was a top 10 player on their board. And so my question for you is, there has been some reporting, I think Albert Breer saying that a lot of teams just had Jihaad Campbell off their board because of the shoulder injury concerns. What did Howie say about the injuries with Jihaad Campbell?
Yeah, he said they had the medical check, the recheck at the combine. He said they share information with all the teams. He speculated that he inferred or implied rather that the reason why Campbell dropped was probably because of the way some teams interpreted the injury. They didn't seem concerned about it. He didn't put a timetable on it. Neither did Campbell. Campbell said he's kind of taking it day to day here. But the Eagles, as you said, Howie's emphasis was top 10 player and someone that that they really wanted here, that they coveted, and the injuries did. They seemed to think the injury was why he dropped, but was not something that was getting in the way of them taking him.
And on that point, lots of reporting that the Eagles were trying to move up throughout the back end of the first round. What did Howie say about that? Was that all for Jihaad Campbell?
It certainly sounds that way too. And he said the reason they made the trade one spot with the Chiefs was like just to ensure that no one else traded up to get him. But yeah, it certainly sounded like in the 20s there, Campbell was their target.
Yeah, and honestly, I can tell you from the course of the entire pre-draft process, anytime I talked with people about Jihaad Campbell and landing spots, everything was potentially as high as 11, 12, 15. I remember the Cincinnati Bengals, it's at 18. Certainly the Tampa Bay Bucks at 19 felt like a ceiling or a floor for a large part of this process. Seattle, I had heard. So this was a guy that was going to go anywhere from the early stages of the teens up until the meat of the first round. So getting him at 31, it makes sense why the Eagles were so gung-ho about the potential of being able to trade up for him. And to me, in a scenario like that matches up with what they're saying in terms of, hey, he was the last player in a certain tier. That's when you have that extra motivation to try and move up and acquire that player.
Zach, you've been to a lot of these post-round one press conferences. How did Howie's enthusiasm match up to like past years for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Howie's at a point now, right, where Super Bowl MVP. I think he's. Oh, I'm sorry.
In his mind, maybe, yeah.
Super Bowl MVP, yeah. Super Bowl winning GM. That I think he feels very confident in how he goes about the process and in their evaluation. So he knows what to say without like saying it explicitly. So it was very clear the pass rush elements that he was speaking about, right? And that he kept referring to the fact that we're not putting him in a box. He pushed back on the idea of like the way Vic Fangio's made him change his mind on linebackers because because he did not want to put Campbell in that box. He kept mentioning the pass rush ability. Like I said, he implied the Penn State thing, but then when I asked Nick Sirianni specifically about player comparisons, something that Nick brought up last week, Howie jumped in and said that's an unfair question. And I think because I don't think the Eagles want to put out there that they compared him internally to Micah Parsons or these edge rushers, right? I think this is more comparable in their eyes to taking Micah Parsons, just to use an all-pro example, than a Fred Warner or Roquan Smith. Like I think that they're viewing him as someone who is not a blitzer, but a pass rusher.
What was your evaluation of him as a pass rusher, Fran?
Better than Jalen Walker, who went 15 overall and was also viewed as one of those hybrid players. And honestly, I was just kind of going through trying to find my notes because I remember being at the Combine, and it was the night of the pass rushers and the defensive tackles, the linebackers work out at the end. And typically, if you after an entire position group goes through the work of all their drills, if a player needs to get worked out for an extra set of drills, maybe it's a wide receiver or running back that wants to go through receiver drills, something along those lines, it happens at the end. Well, Jihaad Campbell, after doing the linebacker workout, they said, teams want to see you go through defensive line drills. So I'm like, all right, let me sit back down. Let me get my binder out. Let's take these notes. He goes through, he runs the hoop. He runs through the bags. He does the full gauntlet of the defensive line drills after he did his linebacker workout. I was like, man, he looks awesome going through these defensive line drills. And so, look, I already watched the film on Jihaad Campbell and said, this guy's got that flexibility to be able to kick down and play on that role. But just seeing him kind of go through those paces was eye-opening, certainly.
Last thing from me, Zach, is because of that, if we're thinking of him as an edge, we're wondering what does that mean for Nakobe Dean when we think that this guy's a linebacker. I know Howie was asked about that. What did he say?
Yeah, he said this didn't really have anything to do with Dean. And I think they're viewing it as like a disruptive football player, to use the kind of the way Campbell framed it himself, that you can get him on the field and you can find ways to use him, that he can play 3 downs because of his ability to cover up. Obviously, like the versatility really jumps out. I don't think this is a Nakobe Dean replacement like 1-for-1, because I think it's a different playing style. But the ability to rush the quarterback, the thing that kept coming on in my mind when this pick was made and in the minutes afterwards and the hours afterwards, is that you and I did a show back the 2021 draft when Eagles took Devontae Smith, and they didn't take Micah Parsons then. And one thing we always said is, well, if they evaluated Parsons as a edge rusher, maybe it would be different. So I think that if you kind of take away the labels, I wouldn't even say positionless, because I just think multi-positional is a better way to put it, is that he can play off the ball. He's shown that, but he's someone who, because of his ability to rush the quarterback, it wouldn't surprise me if the first time we see him play, he's with Nolan Smith and he's with those guys as opposed to with Nakobe Dean.
You look like you have something to say.
Yeah, I mean, it was just to me, this is like personal growth from Zach. Zach, this is exactly it. I think when you're looking at Campbell, that multi-positional value is that is a differentiator between he and a player like an Isaiah Simmons, right? When you look, hey, he could do all of these things, but does he do any of them well? When I looked at Campbell, I said, he can do all of this stuff well. We could talk about the off-ball aspect of things, but he looks like an NFL rusher, or vice versa. When he was doing the off-ball stuff, I'm like, he can get a little bit better here or there, but he looks like a legit linebacker prospect. And so, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
All right, the Eagles add a ferocious player to what was already the best defense in football. We'll find out what they do on night 2 and day 3. We will be here throughout all of it on PHLY. Check it out throughout draft weekend.